Golden Wind is, in my opinion, the most consistent JoJo part. I think it rarely strays into bad territory, but at the same time, it doesn't reach the extreme heights that some other parts do. For that reason, and because this is a series at this point, I thought today was as good a time as any to look at all of Golden Wind's arcs and rank them worst to best. As always, the arcs are being taken from major story changes and fights, and of course, this is just my opinion. Alright, let's jump in. I'm not sure how well liked this fight is in the community, but to me, Babyface has always been the worst arc of Golden Wind. Now, like I said in the intro, this arc isn't bad, none of them are, but Babyface has a few aspects that I never liked. First off, the villain is amazing. Milone is great, but so is almost every other villain in the part. Really, my main issue is his stand. I like the idea that Milone has to raise it, it leads to some funny moments, but the actual ability of the stand to turn living things into inanimate objects has never been particularly enjoyable to me. It just leads to too abstract of a fight for my taste, which leads to it being really boring. Babyface's ability just doesn't lead to the sort of well thought out outsmarting that I've come to expect from JoJo. It's just sort of the same thing throughout, not helped by the fact that I know Giorno, Bruno, and Trish obviously aren't going to die. Sure, that's true for a lot of the fights, but other ones have other stakes. For example, a later arc, White Album, has the stake of Ghiaccio finding the disc. This is good because even though we know Giorno won't die, there is still something that we want to pay attention for. In the case of Babyface, this extra stake doesn't really exist. The one thing I will give it is that it allows Giorno to learn how to heal, which is actually a really good way to introduce that element of gold experience. It's a lot better than Giorno just pretending like he could do it all along, and it's a good way to demonstrate a bit of growth in him. My other issue with this fight is that it requires a crazy suspense of belief. It's a bit better in the anime, but seriously, how did the gang not realize something was wrong here? Giorno, Trish, and Bruno are missing, and Giorno clearly looks in distress, but nobody even bothers to go up to him for minutes on end. The fight itself isn't bad though, with this being the rare Giorno only fight. I actually like the way he plays this, especially the ending where he sends a snake back to kill Milone. It's a really smart strategy that shows how amazing of an ability gold experience can be. I really don't have much to say on this one, it's just really middle of the road. It isn't anything terrible, but nothing exceptional either. Unlike the last arc, Clash and Talking Head is an arc I actively dislike, but the reason it places above is that the arc reaches higher heights than Babyface does. This is the first arc after the betrayal of the boss, the first one without Fugo, and so I expected a lot while watching it for the first time, and those expectations were not met. We begin with Abakio, Narancia, and Mista harassing civilians, which is a great scene. Narancia then sees a shark in his soup, which bites his tongue off and applies Talking Head. We're then introduced to Tiziano and Squalo, which are on the lower side of this part's villains for me, but they're still good. If there's one thing part 5 does really well, it's the villains. Everything up to this point is good, but for some reason after this, the collective IQ of the gang becomes 10 as they can't decipher that Narancia is clearly in danger. The constant lies he tells that don't line up and his clear distress should be enough for them to assume something is wrong, but it takes so ridiculously long for Giorno to even notice that something is up. This will bring us into something of an issue I have with Golden Wind, but I kinda hate how Giorno is treated like the perfect and most intelligent human being to ever live. There are so many times in this part where he operates at a level above the whole gang, and while to an extent he's manipulating them, especially at the beginning, I always thought that this whole thing goes a little bit too far sometimes. With that said, I do think that the rest of this arc is pretty good. Aerosmith gets some really unique use, with Narancia really utilizing its heating ability. The fact that he does things like cauterize his wound using it is super cool. Narancia chasing Clash around the sewer is well done, and even though we know Giorno isn't dead, this moment still holds weight because without him, the rest of the team can't heal. I also think the way Tiziano uses Talking Head is super cool, letting Narancia tell the truth sometimes when it's to their advantage. Finally, Narancia cutting his tongue out was a good direction to take the fight. A lot of Golden Wind fights involve people being crazy determined, and this is a good example of that. Really, my main issue with this arc is that the beginning is always tedious on a rewatch and isn't even funny the first time. Besides that, the actual fight is pretty good, and I like Tiziano and Squalo as characters. Golden Wind's intro in isolation is a good arc, but in the context of the full story, I don't think it actually does too great of a job at introducing its characters. To start, I like Koichi introducing us to Italy, and seeing Jotaro again is very cool. Giorno's character introduction just seems a little bit inconsistent with his later appearances though. It seems like Araki still wasn't 100% sure which direction he wanted to take the story, with Giorno in these early parts seeming kind of off. We start with a short intro to Giorno where he steals Koichi's stuff. This is our first time seeing his stand, which especially in its early appearances has some crazy inconsistency. It's still a very cool ability to give a protagonist though, and we see the potential of it with the way Giorno creates a tree when running from Koichi. The main thing highlighted here is that any attack against an organism Giorno makes is reflected, which was sort of abandoned as the story went on. I'm not saying it never happened again, but I will say that it became far less prominent. If I had to guess, Araki just realized that this ability made Giorno practically unbeatable since he could summon animals that couldn't be attacked. I'm glad this ability was abandoned since it makes fights a lot more interesting, but it's always jarring on a reread. Another good example of this mischaracterization is Giorno's encounter with Leaky Eye Luca. While this kind of hatred for those who are unjust still exists later, I mean, we see it especially with Cioccolata and Diavolo, here Giorno has a much more obviously Dio-like attitude. I mean, he literally says muda muda as he walks away. The other thing was the whole I don't like repeating myself thing. It just all feels out of character, but the reveal of him being Dio's son is still very cool. Next up is the introduction of Bruno. While I don't like early Giorno, I love early Bruno. He's so well established, and I like his early manga design more than what was stuck with. The ensuing stand battle is good, until Giorno hits Bruno with the second OP gold experience ability. Similar to the damage reflection, it's not like there's a time where Giorno could have used this again and didn't, other than Cioccolata, but it's still just a weird thing to introduce and never touch again. The only two times we actually see Giorno do it are both against Bruno here, and I'm not a fan of that. The conclusion to this fight is good though, with Giorno talking to Bruno about what his goal is, giving exposition to both us and the audience. It's where we hear Giorno's backstory, which is really cool because he's the first JoJo to get a real backstory. I mean, we get the short Josuke savior flashback and the Jotaro being a delinquent, but Giorno's really defines him as a character and was overall a good addition. All in all, Golden Wind's intro is a mixed bag. I enjoy some of the early establishment and themes, but the inconsistency of both Giorno's character and his stand sours it a bit for me. Character intros are to me one of the most important aspects of writing, and having the intro being so different from how he appears later is unfortunate. The first few arcs of Golden Wind after its intro are sort of dedicated to each member of the gang, and this is Mista's first one. It's really hard to say this definitively, but I think Mista is my favorite member of Team Bucciaratti. This first fight is nothing bad, but it's not special either. I'd call it probably the most forgettable fight in the whole part. The arc continues the story of the previous, with the gang going to find the treasure hidden on Capri. Giorno decides that he and Mista will go together to catch Sale, and I really like the way he uses the fish here. I know it's a small thing, but I always appreciated the way Giorno would smartly use his stand. We're also introduced to Sex Pistols here, which is among my all-time favorite stands. It was such a good way for Araki to have a proper gunslinger, and the stand's personality makes it one of the most memorable. What's not memorable though is Sale. While I like the way he's introduced, everything past that is just sort of boring. Like I've already said, part 5 has some great villains, so to see one as generic as Sale just sticks out. He contributes to the arc in general being forgettable, with him also having one of the most notoriously forgotten stands in the series. Craftwork is probably my least favorite stand of the whole part. While there are some cool uses of it, I particularly like how he uses it to sort of float. The ability doesn't lead to anything that interesting in combat. In the anime, this is also where we get Mista's backstory. While this was also never one of my favorites, I like Mista as a character so much that I'm willing to let it slide. The main problem here is that a lot of the fight is just Mista shooting, it doesn't work, he shoots again, and repeat. The fight ends with Mista using Sex Pistols to lodge a bullet further into Sale's head, incapacitating him. With their two enemies gone, the gang goes to the bathroom to get Popo's treasure. This is where we're introduced to one of the most intriguing characters in JoJo, Trish. I say intriguing because I simultaneously really like her writing and don't. Every time I reread or rewatch the part, I can't quite form a concrete opinion of her. On one hand, she's obviously far less important than any other member of the gang, but on the other hand, she has some of my favorite scenes in the whole part. But that's all for later. For now, this arc ends on the gang being given the mission to protect Trish, with Giorno and Bruno understanding that this is their chance to get close to the boss. Overall, Sex Pistols Appears is a fine arc, it has an okay fight and furthers the story in a really interesting way. If there's one thing I like about Golden Wind, it's that the goal of the main characters changes a lot, which makes it always interesting to follow. I think this is a pretty unpopular opinion, but just hear me out. Notorious B.I.G. was one of the more hyped up arcs of this part. I remember before reading it, I was so excited, but as I was reading it, I honestly felt a little let down. It's definitely a good fight, just nothing extraordinary to me. My main issues all come down to more technical things. First of all, this fight has one of the biggest plot holes in all of JoJo. Literally, the whole arc surrounds the idea that Giorno can't use gold experience since he has no hands, but we see earlier in the the part that he can use gold experience out of his legs as well. I know that this shouldn't really take away from the fight, but I just think it's a little lame. Also, I don't like how weirdly inconsistent BIG's ability is. That whole thing with the fingers and Giorno writing and the soccer ball is all just so weird. I think Araki just didn't know exactly what he wanted this stand to be. I enjoy some of the story aspects. I always liked the way they just broke into an airport and then stole a plane. We already know that the plan isn't going to work since they're trying to fly a plane in an episode of JoJo, but the sudden panic that BIG causes is good. I like the initial struggle to get it out of the plane, but when it flies right back and everybody is unable to fight, we're left with Trish. This is Trish's only real time to shine, with her stand being hinted towards all the way back in the prosciutto and pesci fight. I actually like Spice Girl a lot, another simple stand that is used really well throughout the part. Her fighting BIG is the best part of this arc, coming to the eventual conclusion that they'll have to abandon the plane. I'm glad that they don't make her get saved by another character. This is truly her fight and her fight only. This has even more significance considering that the plane was flying to the place her mother lived. Really, I like everything past Giorno cutting his hand off, but everything before that feels very inconsistent and unrealistic. Like, it feels as though the characters are trying their best to force Trish to fight the stand. Overall though, this arc is not bad. It has a great fight and an introduction to a stand I really like, but it falls a bit flat for me due to the plot holes and its beginning. This arc serves as our final introductory arc, with this properly establishing all the main gang except Trish. It's the first appearance of a lot of characters, and I remember while watching feeling as if it came too quickly. I ended up being totally wrong since the anime surprised me by establishing each character at a good pace. The subsequent arcs all mostly focus on one character, which I really like. This arc mostly focuses on Abbacchio, but we see these small scenes to show their dynamic. Scenes like Fugo stabbing Narancia, and Mista destroying Narancia's boombox, and Abbacchio telling Narancia to shut up. Man, there's a lot of Narancia abuse in this arc. Jokes aside, these scenes establish the gang well and make them all quickly likable. Another thing I like about this arc, and all of Golden Wind really, is that there's always a goal within an arc. In this one, the goal is to sail to find Popo's treasure, and that confines the group to a ship, which I also enjoy. The actual fight begins with the group members slowly disappearing one by one. The mystery of where they're going is an interesting one. I like Giorno trying to help before he realizes that Abbacchio won't trust him no matter what. In order to gain that trust, he allows himself to be punctured, which allows Abbacchio to see how they're doing it with Moody Blues. Moody Blues is such a cool stand in terms of design, but I always found its ability to be a bit underwhelming. It's not bad, but probably my least favorite from the main team. After Abbacchio is punctured, through both he and Giorno's sacrifice, Bruno can have a cool little aura farming moment before revealing how the enemy is doing it. Mario used a deflated boat on top of theirs and moved between the cracks. This is such an amazing use of what is generally a very simple ability. Mario is swiftly defeated and we get the iconic torture dance as a result. This scene is really great. Both the animation and the song are phenomenal. The arc concludes with the group finding out about Sale and Abbacchio starting to warm up a little to Giorno. Overall, this arc is good, but there isn't much to say about it. A lot of what it does is just done better in other arcs, but there's nothing wrong with it, so it still places relatively high. This arc begins with the gang getting to a safe house and properly starting to watch Trish. This arc doesn't focus on her though. In fact, it's one of the only arcs in the whole part that really only focuses on one character. I can actually really appreciate that, and this early establishment did a great job at making me really care for Narancia. The fight begins with Narancia trying to go back home after buying supplies. As he goes back to the car, he sees Formaggio sitting in the back seat, who ends up slashing him with his stand, Little Feet. Little Feet is an extremely simple ability, but I actually really like it for that reason. Aerosmith is also revealed around here, which is another stand I love. Seriously, I can't get over how basically every part 5 stand is so good. As Little Feet starts to take effect, we see Narancia begin to shrink. And this is just a personal thing, but I always hated in TV shows when a character would begin shrinking, but they'd take forever to figure it out. Anyways, we get Narancia's backstory around this time, and I really love it. Seeing the way he was betrayed by people who he thought were his friends is so sad. And I don't know why, but he always felt the most like a kid to me. Like, yeah, I know Giorno is 15, but Narancia actually feels young, and that makes this all so much sadder. This backstory also contributes to an amazing scene later. The fight proceeds with Narancia trying to call Bruno. For various shrinking related reasons, he can't reach the phone, and he eventually ends up just fighting Formaggio. Both Narancia and Formaggio use their stands really well here. I like all the different ways Formaggio tries to disguise his breathing. It reminds me of the part I actually liked from Clash and Talking Head. Once Formaggio catches Narancia and puts him in with the spider, the fight begins to dampen a bit for me, but we immediately get back to some great great stuff with the scene of Narancia lighting everything on fire. It shows his crazy level of determination and the respect he has for his gang. Especially in the anime, this scene just looks so cool. This fight does a really good job at making me really like Narancia, and the conclusion is great as well. I like this weirdly cowboy-esque scene between Narancia and Formaggio, as well as Formaggio telling Narancia that the group is getting into something bigger than they think. It's a great bit of foreshadowing to how much the stakes will be raised in the coming arcs. Overall, Narancia's Aerosmith is a great arc. It extends Narancia's character in an intriguing way, as well as having a really engaging fight. This is an early arc that really shows how Golden Wind will operate for the remainder of its story. What I appreciate about this one and the intro is that they are almost entirely dedicated to just personifying Giorno. Golden Wind takes the longest time out of all parts to introduce its side characters, which really allows us to find out more about our protagonist. This is also our first real intro to any characters other than Giorno, Koichi, and Bruno. Polpo is a great first antagonist. I like how his design just makes absolutely no sense. Like, yeah, sure, he's 11 feet tall and 600 pounds. Of course he is. The introduction to Passione is a great exposition into the organization that the entire part will focus on. Golden Wind was really the first part Araki wrote that takes you into its own little world. This is something that he's been doing more and more recently, with parts 7, 8, and 9 so far almost being entirely disconnected from each other. I think it really shows his strength as a writer, and this arc quickly establishes everything we need to know. Giorno's lighter test is great. I've said this before, but I love in JoJo when the characters have to do some mundane action in order to fight a stand. This is also when Koichi is still active in the story. I appreciate that Araki went with him over Josuke, since Koichi and Giorno are a lot more interesting of a duo. When the lighter gets put out, we get introduced to Black Sabbath. This is a really cool stand, and the fact that it hides in the shadows means that Giorno is on a timer. The way he uses gold experience really shows how creatively this ability can be used. I've said before that part 5 has probably my favorite stands out of any part, and I think gold experience is probably my favorite protagonist stand, other than Soft and Wet. I've never been the biggest fan of auto pursuit stand fights. I like actually hearing the user's thoughts while fighting. Despite that, this one is still pretty good due to Giorno and Koichi teaming up. The conclusion to the fight has more of that excellent ability use, and I always like Giorno telling Koichi not to reveal him to Jotaro. I can't really describe why, it's just such an early defining moment for him. We conclude with Giorno being accepted by Polpo before secretly killing him. To be honest, the way Giorno kills him has always seemed a little inconsistent with his ability, and I've never liked inconsistent stands, but I'll let this one slide. Giorno killing Polpo here shows how he really cares about other people. He still has the cruelty of Dio, but it's directed towards people who are truly evil rather than just anybody who stands in his way. This is more great early characterization for Giorno, which was something that was missing from later in the part to me. This is the last arc where it feels like Giorno does something that truly surprises me. The rest of the part just sort of has him stay stagnant. That's not inherently a bad thing, but I do like seeing the JoJo's grow throughout their parts. This is an early arc that once again brings great characterization to Giorno and has a good fight to boot. I don't know if it's unpopular to not have this in top 5 or something, but I want to make it clear that I do like this arc. It's just that all the ones above it do a little more with the story. This arc just doesn't move the story forward very much, and for how long it is, it can feel like a bit of a slog on a reread. Once again, it's not bad, just kind of slow. The arc begins with the crew investigating the face of the boss that Abakio gave them. This is when the group is contacted by a mysterious third party who claims that they have a way for them to overcome King Crimson. We also hear about the origins of the stand era, which I always appreciated. It doesn't envelop the whole story. It's not like the group has to go to Greenland now or something, but the short backstory is enough to satisfy the question of where it came from. As the group pulls up to Rome, something is clearly wrong, with 2 stand users awaiting them. I know Chocolata and Secco have their fans, and it's not like I hate them or anything, but they're just so unbelievably evil and gross, to the point where it's hard to feel anything but disgust. Like, everything about both of them is just plain repulsive. It's horrible. Chocolata's ability is crazy overpowered, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's done well here. I like how Narancia and Trish are pretty much out of commission from the start. It means that the team is thinned and there's only 3 stand users who can really fight. What is unfortunate though is that this is the only fight before Diavolo that Trish has access to her stand in, other than BIG. Because of that, I would have rather seen her able to fight, but it's not a big deal. After some initial scuffle between Bruno, Mista, and Secco, which has some great use of both sticky fingers and sex pistols, they eventually get away. The whole mystery of what's going on with Bruno Bruno is brought back here. The scene where Giorno asks him later in the car is always a little haunting to me. This is the first time we see Bruno's senses become non-functional, and just hearing him say that he's going to die soon so casually is just sad. The moment is interrupted by Cioccolata again, and the group agrees to have Giorno and Mista fight Cioccolata and Bruno fight Secco. These are my two favorite dynamics of groups in the cast. Giorno and Mista complement each other so well, and Bruno's solo fights are also amazing. Sticky Fingers is such an open-ended ability, so it leads to such a unique fighting style. We see this immediately, with Giorno and Mista combining their abilities to shoot tree roots to stop the helicopter, and Bruno having a fast one-on-one with Secco on the ground. Now, I've never been a fan of the part where Sex Pistols gets attacked. It turns out that with Cioccolata's expertise as a surgeon, he knew exactly how to cut himself so as to not die, allowing himself to better hide. This is one of those moments where the absurdity of the series goes a little too far for my taste, but that's just my opinion. The next part makes up for it though, with a convoluted series of bullets turning into branches and then back into bullets, eventually resulting in Giorno shooting Cioccolata in the head. The next moments have since become iconic, with Giorno sparing Cioccolata no mercy, brutalizing the guy before throwing him into a garbage truck. The fight then shifts back to Bruno and Secco, who are now in a race to the Colosseum. I've always liked fights where the team is trying to stop the enemy from doing something, other than killing them of course, and this is another example of that. Bruno and Secco then begin fighting underground. Secco uses this cool strategy of spitting up pieces of the ground, which become solid in midair and then fall to impale Bruno. The strategy works, and just as you think things can't get any crazier, we get our big reveal. The person waiting at the Colosseum is our dearly beloved Jean-Pierre Polnareff. The fight concludes with more tense Bruno and Secco shenanigans, eventually ending with Bruno blowing up a tire since he can't hear anyway. I always found this conclusion to be a little silly, because even after this moment we see that Bruno still has some hearing, and also even deaf people can experience inner ear damage from a sound this loud. Regardless, as Secco gets desperate, he takes a nearby boy hostage who happens to be Doppio. After throwing Secco where he belongs, Bruno is accompanied by Doppio to cross the street. This is a super tense cliffhanger and also where I'm going to end the arc. Overall, Green Day and Oasis is a good arc. There's a great fight here and it's our penultimate moment. My only issues with it are the conclusion to the Secco fight, and also there are certain moments where it drags a bit too long, particularly at the beginning and end. This is one of the harder arcs to rank for me because I consider it to be the most varied arc of this part. I've been saying this whole video that Golden Wind is very consistently good, but this arc is where that sort of went down the drain for me. It's obviously still great overall, but there are just some aspects I don't like. We begin where the Cioccolata and Secco fight ended. Bruno is being walked to the Colosseum by Doppio. This scene is very tense, with Doppio having to avoid being spotted by any other member of the gang while still approaching the Colosseum with Bruno. Another high stakes moment is when Polnareff demands to have Doppio prove that he is in fact Trish. This leads to one of my favorite plot decisions of this part. Diavolo and Polnareff actually have a history. The scene of Polnareff being effortlessly cut up by Diavolo has always been one of my favorites. Not exactly sure how he survived this, but whatever. The stakes rise even more when Polnareff notices that Bruno's friend is now gone. We then get one of my favorite sequences of the part again, with Doppio morphing into Diavolo. Polnareff's counter to King Crimson is super cool, using his blood to detect when time has been skipped. And Diavolo's counter is equally cool, splashing blood in his face mid-time skip so that he can't see. I've said it before, but I love when stand users abuse the terms of each other's stands. Like the fact that Diavolo's blood is a part of him so he can be freely manipulated during time skip is so cool. The next part is great too, with Polnareff stabbing Chariot with the arrow resulting in the first Requiem stand. This is the moment where this arc goes from amazing to a bit lame. The next few chapters are all just body swap nonsense where they're all trying to figure out who they are and making jokes about it. We also see here that the group stands have all been powered up for really no reason. It's not like all stands were powered up since King Crimson seemingly works the same, and this doesn't even lead to anything, so why include it? I will say Chariot Requiem is one of the coolest looking stands. Its ability is mixed. I like the aspect of not being able to attack it since it represents your own shadow and therefore you're attacking yourself, but the whole body swap thing is weird. When I first watched Golden Wind, I thought Requiem just did whatever the user desired most at the time of piercing themselves. Giorno is later gifted with the perfect ability to defeat Diavolo, and here, Chariot is seen running away with the arrow while nobody can stop him. It seems appropriate, but we later see that this is Chariot Requiem's ability no matter what, so I ask, why? At least Gold Experience Requiem is an extension of Giorno's abilities to an extent. This is nothing like regular Chariot's abilities at all. To be honest, I never liked Requiem. It's too vague for my taste, and not in a good way like Diavolo's backstory, for example. That's cool because he's meant to be mysterious, something that ends up killing our main villain should not be mysterious. Back to the story, Narancia ends up being killed by King Crimson. This scene is very sad. It feels a bit cheap to have Narancia harp on suddenly about how happy he will be when this is all over, but this line always makes me sad. Doppio also dies here, which also feels sad. This line is similarly depressing. As the team chases Chariot Requiem, King Crimson is revealed to be residing in one of their bodies, and Diavolo claims that he knows how to defeat Chariot. Giorno then tries to find whose body Diavolo is in, only for things to go south and he and Trish end up being attacked. I'm not a fan of this either. This whole scene is dragged out and the unknown elements of Chariot Requiem are at their worst here, with King Crimson now having control over Trish's body. The floating sun idea is actually kind of cool, and I do like what comes next, with the group using their various sand abilities to prevent King Crimson from grabbing the arrowhead. And with that, I'm gonna end the arc here. It's a little hard to figure out exactly where this one ends and the next one begins, but this is where the episode ends, so I'll just leave it here. Overall, this arc is really a mixed bag. It has some of my favorite scenes of the whole part, but it also has some of the most meandering and weirdly written aspects of all of JoJo. Requiem especially is just such a poorly thought out concept to me. Regardless, it places highly because I can still enjoy it, and I have to give credit for having some of my favorite sequences of the whole part, especially with the Diavolo and Polnareff reunion. And as much as I've complained, there are still a lot of good aspects. We continue right where the Requiem quietly plays left off, with Diavolo about to grab the arrowhead. Bruno making the decision to allow himself to die for the sake of their future is an amazing sequence. I love that we see his clear belief in the justice of what they're doing, and his love for all the members of his team. This scene of him talking to Giorno one last time is also amazing. I always thought Giorno and Bruno had one of the better relationships in Golden Wind, and this caps it off so well. Diavolo decides to run from Giorno, but Trish's rage bait combined with Epitaph's prediction makes him stay. Giorno does what we've been waiting the last 3 episodes for and pierces his stand with the arrow. And it turns out Diavolo saw wrong, since Giorno is now blessed with Gold Experience Requiem in one of the best panels and animated stills of the part. One part of Requiem that I do like is the fate and worthiness aspect of it. The fact that Giorno had Gold Experience stabbed by an arrow earlier in the part by Black Sabbath, but he was simply injured instead of gaining Requiem is cool. It shows how he matured along his journey and became worthy of such a grandiose ability through his experiences and the people around him. Just when it seems like it's over for Diavolo, he forecasts himself killing Giorno through Epitaph. Knowing that this reality is fated to happen, he simply skips time to allow it to happen without issue from any stands. Well, so he thought, since it turns out that everything just rewinds back to where it was. Giorno is now pretty much immortal, with his new ability seemingly making him untouchable. Every time Diavolo tries to get close, he's brought back to where he was, resulting in an infinite loop of him trying to reach Giorno, but failing. It's a cool idea, and the execution of such an overpowered ability is done pretty well. As Giorno pummels Diavolo, he gets sent into the Tiber River, being forced to infinitely die. The scenes in which this is shown are done pretty well, but they leave a lot in the air about how Gold Experience Requiem actually works. Earlier it's obvious, Diavolo will never reach Giorno, but here there are entirely maybe fictional, maybe real scenarios of Diavolo's death being set up over and over again. Honestly, I've never been the biggest fan of the death loop. It's since become iconic, which I understand, but I think Diavolo dying to a drug user stabbing him, a drug user he almost certainly provided the drugs for, is an extremely fitting end for him. Someone who thought he was above all other people, someone who hurt so many others just to push himself up, being killed by someone he would consider to be the lowest of the low. It's a lot more thematically interesting than the death loop, but to be fair, that scene still happens, so there's something there. Back to the group, Mista tells Giorno that they have to hurry and heal Bruno. I'm honestly glad we didn't see the reaction to him being dead, since I think it genuinely would have been too much. I think that the fact that this is the last time we see them before the time skip is good. Giorno seeing his fallen comrades in the sky is a good conclusion to another great arc. Overall, Gold Experience Requiem is the climax of Golden Wind and has a lot of intense moments in it. I thought Bruno's final death and the themes of fate and righteousness were really cool, and with that one change to Diavolo's death, this would transform into a really amazing conclusion for Golden Wind's base story. Man in the Mirror is an interesting arc because it's the only appearance of what has since become a fan favorite stand. It's also Fugo's only real time to shine within this part, making it one that I think a lot of people remember. It serves as the first direct mission from the boss, with Giorno, Abbacchio, and Fugo being sent to the Pompeii ruins to retrieve a key. For the fact that we're still relatively early in the part, having this trio together allows for more growth in all of them, particularly Fugo, who to this point hasn't done much. As they're going, the most predictable thing ever happens and their attack attacked by a stand user. Illuso is a more forgettable villain, but still good. He immediately takes Fugo into the mirror world and starts beating him up. As Fugo summons purple haze, we see that he can't access it in the mirror world. This stand is incredibly overpowered, and I think there's a reason we never saw it in a proper stand-on-stand battle. The only real disadvantage is that Fugo can't properly control it, but even then, in most situations, it would be amazing to have. I always liked when stands represented their users really well, and Purple Haze does an amazing job at that. The self-hatred and deep anger Fugo harbors towards himself and the world is so clearly shown. This is also where the anime added the backstory for Fugo. This is one of my favorite additions ever made between manga and anime. While it does contradict Purple Haze feedback, I think that's fine because it tells the story so well. The unfairness of the world directed towards him is something common among all the members of the gang. Almost all of them had some terrible event happen to them that wasn't really their fault, but still ruined their life. Fugo's whole story is just heartbreaking and really contributed to my love for him as a character. The ensuing argument between Giorno and Abbacchio is another good character moment for each of them, with Giorno wanting to save Fugo and Abbacchio wanting to finish the mission. As they find the key, Abbacchio is dragged into the mirror, but it's revealed that this is actually Moody Blues disguised as Abbacchio. I really like this twist, and the way that Illuso immobilizes both Abbacchio's body and stand is also smart. Giorno's plan is also great, moving his own infected body into the mirror world, forcing Illuso out and into Purple Haze. They track him using a snake and end up finishing him off. Another detail I love is Giorno using the snake that grew up in Purple Haze's virus as an antibody, since the snake can obviously live within the poison. The arc concludes with the gang surviving, although each of them is badly wounded. Fugo tells Giorno that he now respects him, and even Abbacchio starts to soften up in his own way. This arc has some of my favorite uses of stand. Each person uses their abilities so uniquely, but none of it seems nonsensical. There's no point in this arc where I say, that doesn't really make sense, but whatever, which definitely sometimes happens in JoJo. Combine that with the amazing Fugo backstory, and we're left with a really special arc that demonstrates not only character development, but also really well done stand use. This is another fan favorite arc that to me is one of the most memorable of the part. It's the first arc after all our main characters have been properly established, and it introduces the mainstay element of Coco Jumbo. Also, I know I keep saying it, but the stand abilities here are so cool. Grateful Dead and Beach Boy are both relatively simple, but they lead to such dynamic battles. We begin on the train with Mista trying to track down the source of their aging as he's attacked by Beach Boy. The sibling dynamic between Prosciutto and Pesci is just another on the laundry list of reasons I love Golden Wind's villains. They just work so well off each other, and Pesci's lack of confidence is a good way to keep Beach Boy from being annoyingly overpowered. Mista eventually outsmarts Pesci, to which he is promptly outsmarted by Prosciutto. The way Prosciutto uses Grateful Dead here is so cool, and I love how if you're observant, you can tell it's him. The fake out death for Mista is a bit lame. I've never liked in JoJo when they fake a character being dead when it's too early for them to die, but at least he's not gone for a third of the part, cough, Avdol, cough. That's a minor complaint though, since the fight from here out is excellent, and Mista is revealed to be alive pretty quickly. As Prosciutto and Pesci look for Coco Jumbo, Bruno gets the jump on them thanks to a warning by pistols. This fight is on a timer since Bruno is actively aging, especially when touched directly by the stand. It's so cool how things like him overexerting himself and therefore heating up are used. As the fight moves outside of the train, things get super messy. I don't want to just retell the whole fight, but these sequences have such intricate stand use that it makes it all so enjoyable to watch. The fight concludes with Bruno using Beach Boy to his advantage, redirecting an attack onto Prosciutto, which puts him out of commission. The ensuing fight with Pesci continues the momentum, with Bruno being forced back into the train and having to cut himself up. To be honest, the scene of him slicing his heart always gets me on a rewatch because it's just so ridiculous. I can sort of appreciate the absurdity though. The fight jumps up another notch when the rest of the gang gets involved, with Pesci threatening to destroy the turtle if Bruno doesn't stop. We get one final Bruno Orifarm before Pesci is defeated. The arc concludes with an arrivederci and a final hint towards the fact that Trish is a stand user. This comes a little early, and we gotta wait a while before this ability is unleashed, so I don't know why it was shown here, but no big deal. Overall, I love Express Train. It's just pure JoJo fighting in the best way possible. Great villains, smart stand use, and a few iconic moments to boot, along with it introducing good mainstay elements like Coco Jumbo. I'm not sure the general opinion of Sleeping Slaves, but to me, Golden Wind would still function as a story without it. But adding it allowed for a lot more of a clear, deep exploration of the story's themes. Sleeping Slaves takes us back before Giorno and tells the short story of a gang interrogating someone who may or may not have murdered a 17-year-old girl. As the day proceeds, Mista keeps seeing this weird stone everywhere. This is a good bit of foreshadowing for later when he straight up sees Bruno as a rock. Scolipi is probably the most forgotten character in all of this part, but I actually like him. His approach to life is so interesting. See, rolling stones casts a painful death to happen soon to someone. This is fated to happen no matter what, but by touching the stone, you can die immediately without pain. Scolipi believes that the rational thing for a person to do is to touch rolling stones, since doing so saves you from your inevitable painful death. It's an interesting way to look at life that goes completely against the gang's way of thinking. Repeatedly throughout the part, they allow themselves to be sacrificed for the sake of others. Abacchio gave them the boss's face, Narancia allowed them to discover that the boss was among them, and Bruno did so much that I can't even describe it all. Scolipi sort of has the same mentality as the boss, just a bit different. Diavolo's ability allows him to skip over any negative events in his life, essentially skipping any pain and hardship, while Scolipi believes that you should just give up and not bother facing that pain. As the arc progresses, Mista sort of brutalizes Scolipi for a bit before he eventually understands that he has to protect Bruno. Mista makes the bold decision to try and destroy Rolling Stones, which he does by jumping out of the building and hitting the pavement. Instead, Fugo's car happens to be driving by, saving Mista and destroying Rolling Stones. This fight is fine, but to be honest, I've never cared about it. I don't think the point of Sleeping Slaves is its fight, especially since Rolling Stones doesn't even really attack you. As everyone recuperates, the broken Rolling Stones turns into 3 stones, one showing Bruno, Abacchio, and Narancia. Scolipi comments that Mista destroying it in the first place was a bad idea, since now 3 people will die. He says that everyone is a sleeping slave to fate, unaware of how it affects the world around you. What's interesting though is that this changed because the car was destroyed, meaning that instead of Fugo investigating Giorno, Bruno went. While this did lead to the death of 2 more people, I'd argue that overall it was better. Imagine how much despair the group would be in after Bruno's death. The point of Sleeping Slaves is that we can change our destiny and fight for a better future without having to skip the bad parts. We can live through hardship and push forward for the world and people around us. It's an amazing end to Golden Wind, and the final scene we get of Giorno as the boss reaffirms this message. Through his friend's sacrifice, he's brought down the tyrannical reign of Diavolo, and he can make Italy a safer place. Sleeping Slaves is a phenomenal arc, and I love the way it wraps up Golden Wind and makes the message of the part overtly clear. And that final scene of Giorno, Mista, and Polnareff is such an amazing ending. White Album is to me the peak of stand creativity in this part. This image has always stuck in my mind, 1, because it's funny, and 2, because it shows how well a simple ability can turn into something so complex with the right writer. White Album follows probably my favorite duo from this part, Giorno and Mista. What I love about it is that in every way, it's so simple. They're trying to get a disc that Ghiaccio is trying to prevent them from obtaining. Such a simple premise turns into such an amazingly thought out fight. We begin when Ghiaccio starts freezing the car around Giorno and Mista. Instantly, Ghiaccio becomes one of my favorite minor villains in JoJo with his incessant rambling. It's such a funny quirk to give his character, and I also really like his design. He just looks so annoying. Ghiaccio seems to be relatively invincible, being impervious to bullets and slowly freezing the 2 in the car. In a desperate move, Giorno drives into the water. Once in the water, the fight really elevates itself again, with Giorno using the car as the recipe for leaves. I really like the limitation that Giorno can't create life in the ice, since nothing can survive at that temperature. Such a natural way to lower his power. The fight continues with more great uses of both gold experience and sex pistols to nail a car piece into Ghiaccio's head. As the fight seems won, things get way worse when Ghiaccio begins using Gently Weeps. Once again, a great expansion of his simple ability, and the fight only gets more desperate. Another aspect I like of this fight is that it's one of the early times that we see a great focus put on determination. Mista's belief in Giorno and his willingness to fight is shown very well here, especially in the scene where he allows himself to get shot in order to splash blood on Ghiaccio's face just so that he can't defend. Just as it seems like Mista won, Ghiaccio freezes the blood on his neck and Mista ends up getting shot in the head. Luckily, the time he bought Giorno allowed him to show up just in time. This shot of Giorno in front of the sun looks so beautiful in both anime and manga. This is one of my favorite moments from the whole part, with Giorno healing Mista's wounds before finishing the job with Ghiaccio. The fight concludes with Mista commenting that Giorno provides him and the rest of the team with such a strong sense of determination. This early loyalty for Giorno is great to see, especially with what ends up happening to these two. White Album is really the peak of everything I love about Golden Wind. Some of the best ability use in this series, furtherment of character dynamics, awesome scenes, and one of the best villains of the part. This arc is one of the most memorable from the part. At least, it's the one I see people argue about the most online. Personally, I've always found it to be one of the best arcs in JoJo and have little to no issues with it. In the anime, we start with Diavolo's backstory. It's quite short and weirdly inconsistent, which I actually really like. I feel like people take this story far too literally, like the part about him being born in an all-female prison. To me, this was always done to make it seem like Diavolo was literally something of legend. Especially given his name and the way he lived with a priest, the allusion to the Antichrist is clear. Such a cool and disturbing little addition to his character. In the manga, this scene was in the final fight with Polnareff, but I actually like it a lot more here. It gives us some early hints towards the boss, even though it's not really much. We are then introduced to Doppio, who is an incredible addition to the story. Making the boss someone who only trusts his own alternate identity furthers his belief in success only for himself. And I love the small quirks like him answering the phone with random objects. I also like that we figured this out pretty quick, with Doppio suddenly switching with Diavolo and killing the fortune teller. The other aspect of this arc I love is that there are 3 groups, all with different goals. Team Bruno wants to rewind with Moody Blues to find the boss's face, Risotto wants to investigate the area for hints and revenge, and Doppio wants to stop everyone from finding anything out. It leads to such an interesting dynamic of Doppio and Risotto fighting while the gang interrupts them. Metallica is also such a powerful ability that it's frankly ridiculous. All the scenes of him making Doppio throw up nails and razors are disgusting. I also really enjoy Doppio's use of King Crimson and Epitaph. Let me just say here that this is probably the best animated episode of this part and one of the best of the whole show. So many scenes are so fluid and well lit. The use of Epitaph to counter Metallica is cool, and Risotto's use of such a simple ability once again highlights just how creative these fights can get. The fight gets really messy and desperate at this point. Doppio has lost the necessary hemoglobin to function, and Risotto has had his foot cut off. When Risotto puts the pieces together of who Doppio is, it really seems like it might be over. Risotto goes invisible and Diavolo won't make it in time to skip, so Doppio makes the decision to throw the knives towards Bruno, leading to Narancia finishing the job for him. Doppio's outsmarting here is wonderfully written, and the fight still isn't over. Diavolo leans over Risotto's dying body, offering to kill him quick as long as he gets his iron back. I love the detail that the sun is blocking Risotto's vision of the boss. It just shows how the universe almost works for him. Risotto's final idea is to use Metallica to control Aerosmith into killing Diavolo. Unfortunately, this is Diavolo we're talking about. He skips time and Risotto is finally left to rest. The arc still isn't over though, since the gang is approaching and Diavolo is still dying. The scenes of him eating the frog are disgusting, but it shows his determination for victory. Now we really reach possibly the most devastating scene in all of JoJo. As Abbacchio helps some kids get their soccer ball, the boss inconspicuously walks past and murders Abbacchio. The following scene of Abbacchio in this dream world with his former partner is so sad, and the train just keeps rolling when the group discovers his body. Narancia's reaction to this situation is so horrible to watch. It's such a natural progression of grief, with him at first saying that Giorno can still heal him, into anger at their reaction, and then into his horrible, horrible depression. The line, "Are we just gonna leave Abbacchio here all alone?" is so good. From the beginning, Narancia knew he was dead, but he just wanted to stay with him a little longer, to pretend for a moment that their mistake didn't lead to his death. He can't pretend to be impartial like the rest of them. He doesn't want to leave Abbacchio. The voice acting here is so unbelievable too. This final scene is honestly one of the crown jewels of JoJo's writing to me. The arc concludes with them discovering the face and fingerprints of the boss Abbacchio left them, showing that his sacrifice wasn't in vain. Overall, this arc contains not only one of the best fights in the part, not only an introduction to one of my favorite characters in the part, but also probably the most devastating character death in the original universe. And I don't even like Abbacchio. This is the closest first and second place so far in this series. It is really hard for me to pick between these two because they're both so perfect, but this arc slightly edges out the previous due to how excellent it is on a reread and how much it flips the story on its head. When I first watched Golden Wind, I imagined that the part would end with the group fighting the boss and eventually winning through some sacrifices, but this arc shattered those expectations. From the beginning, it's something of a wary and somber arc. This is seemingly the last time we'll Bruno see Trish, but something just doesn't feel right. It feels like everything is going too smoothly as Giorno gives his brooch to Bruno. Like there must be some sort of plan we don't know about. The scene in the elevator in particular is so sad. Seeing how scared Trish was to meet her father and Bruno assuring her that she would be safe and loved is just so heartbreaking on a rewatch. And the sudden realization that she's gone hits so hard the first time. There's this heart-dropping moment when you realize that not only did Bruno get outsmarted, but Trish might be dead. We then get the reveal that everything Team Bruno did to this point, all the near-death experiences, all the fighting, it was all so that the boss could kill Trish himself. It recontextualizes everything before this moment in such a smart way. This arc also gives us Bruno's backstory. The cool part of this story is that every other member of the gang's story ends with them being saved by Bruno, but Bruno had to go through this all himself. He joined Passione after he realized that only the strong can prosper against the unjust, but after seeing that they were trading the same drugs that ended up killing his father, his spirit was somewhat broken. He had no choice to avert his eyes until Giorno shows up. This connects amazingly to what he tells Giorno when he dies, saying that his soul had been slowly dying before Giorno arrived. But this is one step too far for Bruno. He refuses to let the boss get away with this and chases after him. The ensuing chase is awesome. Bruno and the audience don't quite know what King Crimson's ability is, but time is of the essence as he will soon kill Trish. As Bruno attacks, he sees Epitaph's vision on the pillar, before we finally get the reveal of King Crimson's ability. Diavolo skips through time and gets the jump on Bruno, punching him straight through the stomach. I've seen criticisms of King Crimson's ability, saying it's inconsistent, and while yes, there are certain times where maybe it operates a little confusingly, for example, technically Diavolo's clothes shouldn't be able to move since they're not a part of him, if you just overlook those small issues, it's such a cool ability. The way it ties into Diavolo as a character is excellent as well. He's literally able to skip through any bad event of his life and prevent it from happening. Through this fight, the true invincibility of King Crimson is shown. Every time you think Bruno might have a chance, Diavolo just skips and moves around him. The scenes outside the crypt are a nice addition. It helps to clear up what King Crimson's ability really is, and these scenes share that same unease I talked about earlier. The fight between Diavolo and Bruno continues, with Bruno trying to get the upper hand through the Coco Jumbo Giorno gave. It's clear that there's no way out as Diavolo once again skips time. However, Bruno takes advantage of the conditions of King Crimson. Epitaph can only show a certain amount of time ahead, so Bruno disguised his actions as attacking the boss when in reality he was trying to run. This is one of my favorite twists in a JoJo fight, because not only does it show how smart Bruno is, but it shows how unstoppable King Crimson is. Even running away is a difficulty. The scene where Bruno's zippers start disappearing makes your heart drop to your pants on a first watch. The little fake out death here is actually good because it has a consequence, and the addition of Bruno's oncoming death is a great one for the rest of the story. Bruno declaring himself a traitor and asking the others to join him is one of the best character-driven scenes in the part. We've seen multiple times that they're loyal to him, but this is the ultimate showing of it, with Mista and Abbacchio following him without much of a second thought. The five of them leaving without Fugo, and especially Narancia, is so sad. The moment when I knew this arc was truly incredible comes here though, with Narancia's Trish's me moment. It's sort of rare that a character's backstory gets this directly referenced in the story, but the tie between Trish and Narancia is so nice, and it shows the flaw in Fugo's thinking. Trish's life matters just as much as theirs do. She didn't want to be put in this situation, and Bruno, as well as the others, see an inherent responsibility to help her. Fugo staying back is an iffy decision to me, but I actually respect Araki for not bringing him back. I know that originally he was supposed to, but I'm glad that this didn't happen. I like this a lot more than killing him off. It feels more realistic that one of the members stays, and also I really like Purple Haze feedback. Overall, I adore this arc. The beginning unease eventually culminating in the mystery of King Crimson is so cool. The fight Bruno and Diavolo have is amazing, and King Crimson has such a unique ability. And the scene of them declaring themselves traitors makes me smile every time, seeing Bruno as the proud mother of Narancia. I just love how much this arc flips the story on its head and how the writing consistently tops itself. And that was my list. Thank you so much for watching, and I apologize for the long time between this and my last video. I had a lot of stuff to do with school, but that's all over now, so uploads should be a little bit more consistent. All right, part 4 video is coming soon, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.